you very much, Jaysha. I am very happy to be here. I'm going to say one thing just right up front. The data I'm about to share with you, in my mind, is actually almost amazing. I use that term to talk to our deans and talk to our provost about what we've seen so far. So let's go into it and let's take a look. Go ahead, Cheryl. Thanks. So a little bit about us first. If you've heard about the University of North Dakota at all, it's probably related to hockey because it is cold up here and we do have a lot of ice, which we'll see a little bit later in my talk today. Winnipeg is our closest major city. That's, of course, if you don't recognize that, that's in Canada. We are very far north. We are about as far north as you can get in the United States. The issue that we deal with are the issues we've been talking about: student affinity, student belongingness, student success in courses, and of course retention, and ultimately completion or degree attainment. We are a public flagship university. We have about 15,000 students. We have about 160 online undergraduate or graduate certificates and programs. And I mentioned that, and I've spelled those out particularly because, as you see down in the red highlighted box, that is an issue with us related to the student success, retention, and completion. Our undergraduate retention rate's 84%, but that's 88% in campus programs and only 67% in online programs. So that is one of the things the major thing we turn to CircleIn for some assistance. Go ahead and move to the next one. Thanks. Now, CircleIn is not alone, or we're not using CircleIn alone. We have a number of things that we put in place, like centralized academic advising that's embedded in colleges, and in some instances, in larger programs, in the programs themselves. Our recent IPEDS first-year retention rate has been the highest ever seen in the state system. So for traditional students, as you know, IPEDS is a very specific group of students. But within those traditional cohorts, we've been doing relatively well for our system, at least. We've also started a pilot project embedding success coaches specifically to work with online programs, and there's a variety of other affinity programs. Going back to what Dr. Salazar mentioned, one of the things we've been doing is to try to identify students that need assistance before it's too late. As she said, midterms, it's ridiculous. At midterm, there's really nothing much more many students can do. So we've been mining our learning management system, Blackboard, to kind of pull out information about logins, activities, whether they're missing assignments, things like that, as soon as possible. But there's also, and what I'm going to talk about today is, what about CircleIn? So go ahead and move to the next slide. Thanks. So as I said, we had a lot of goals for it, and it's particularly around online, but it affects, there's no reason, and although our interest is especially in that area, it's not just in that area. We really wanted to provide opportunities for all our students to connect with one another, facilitate relationships, and be academically successful. Even though we have students in online programs and campus programs, 3/4 of our campus students also take online courses. So our timeline, our relationship with this partnership we have with CircleIn started in fall 2022 with 2 master's programs in our College of Education: counseling, a master's of counseling, and a master's of special ed. We expanded that in fall 23 to include all programs and all courses in 3 colleges, not only the College of Education and Human Development, but also the College of Engineering and Arts and Sciences. In spring 24, we created a little sub-project part of that where we worked with 14 professors and worked with them to encourage student participation, to try to see if we would get greater engagement in those courses. And looking to the next term, we will expand into all programs from those 3 colleges to a 4th one, which is our Nistler College of Business and Public Administration. And I have hopes before the spring actually starts that we'll have at least one, if not two other of our colleges on board, which will be pretty much our whole undergrad population. The main thing I wanted to indicate here is the pilot professors. The pilot professors were successful. They had 15% more of their students using CircleIn in their undergrad courses and 22% more of their students using CircleIn in their grad courses than the professors not in that pilot project. They did even a little bit better with populations that have a little bit, at least at University of North Dakota, have had more difficulty being successful in their academic work. Pell eligible students, first generation students, and students of color. And they were about 18 to 20% more likely to get students engaged in CircleIn. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the course successes, because this is the stuff that really is exciting to me. I've not seen anything like this. And I'm going to say this is spring data. I've just finished analyzing summer data. Summer data is a little weird because our courses are shorter, but nonetheless, the overall pattern looks identical. So what does this show you? Well, basically, this shows you that in our very active courses, so these are courses in which the average study actions are fairly high, our users do 22% better in pass rates. I'm looking at pass rates now. So the opposite of DFWs or DFWUs, we throw unsatisfactory in there as well. In active courses, 13% better than non-users. Active courses, not quite as active as very active, obviously. And then courses in which there's really no use or very little use, there really was no meaningful difference. So clearly in those very active, like Thane was talking about, putting those biology sections together so you get greater activity is likely in our data to lead to a greater improvement in users compared to non-users. Go ahead, Gerald, and let's look at the next one. One of the things that I do want to point out is what we see is activity in the courses tend to be related to how difficult the course is. Low difficulty courses tend to be low use. High difficulty courses tend to be very active. It makes sense, right? I mean, if I'm a student who's getting A's in all my courses and I'm in an easy course, to be honest, I've got a lot of things I have to do. Like Dr. Salazar said, I've got kids I may have to take care of. I may be partly part-time or even full-time employed, or I just might have some other courses that I'd rather spend my time in because they're more difficult for me. So in the high difficulty courses, you can look at the active users versus the non-users, and you can see over 72% pass rate essentially compared to the non-users, which is about a 60% pass rate. In the low difficulty courses, really no difference. Great, the pass rates are higher in those again because by our data in looking at pass rates in the past, those are low difficulty. Short, blunt, those are easier courses. Maybe not easy A's, but easier courses. All right, let's move to the next one. So here we have those special populations. Just wanted to show that we are being successful again with Pell eligible students, first generation students, students of color, in all three cases, the difference between users and non-users in pass rates is quite large. Again, really astounding in a way. But let's look at, I don't want to say this is just students that are traditionally or historically less likely to be successful. We're seeing differences among white students. We're seeing differences, and look at the white first generation and Pell eligible students. Again, the difference in rates are amazing. So my point is it's working with all groups. It's working with groups that traditionally have not done as well at the University of North Dakota, but it's working with everybody else too. Go ahead and turn to the next one. Same thing here, seniors, juniors, sophomores. But most impressively, first years. The biggest difference in first years. Those of you who know retention rates know that first years are most likely to, if you're going to lose a student, you're much more likely to lose that student in their first year. between their first and their second year. Looking at first years and Pell eligibles together. So first years that are Pell eligible, I mean that 10% of non-users or 15%. In a way, that's embarrassing for the university, but nonetheless, over 80%. So when you give that opportunity, and I will tell you this, that one thing you have to keep in mind is a lot of this data is from our online courses, just because those courses are the ones that students are most active in. Go ahead and turn to the next one. Grade point though. So let's look at the different grade point. I took overall GPA of a student, and I looked at their success rates from if they were an active course user to a non-user at every breakdown. Some are bigger than others, but at every breakdown, you're seeing improved pass rates with the use of CircleIn. Oh yeah, the two graphs differ by a very active course, highest study actions, and an active course. Still a fair amount, but not as high. In both cases, we're seeing differences, but the differences do tend to be bigger in the very active courses, which is the one on your left. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so we're at the University of North Dakota. I wanted to make sure you do understand that we have snow. These pictures on the left are the ones the university puts out that shows kind of the pretty version of what we have, whereas the reality of it is to the right. Now, I will admit, I'm kind of taking a little license. These are blizzards that have occurred over maybe 50 years. So, but these are the worst instances. Okay, what do I really want to communicate? Professors from the pilot project we did with a small group of professors, clearly they are effective change agents for increasing the use of CircleIn. Faculty buy-in is important, but it's not absolutely necessary. As can't remember if it was John or Sang that mentioned that the number of invites, students inviting other students on the platform has increased. We see that. And so students are probably actually more effective change agents. But of course, you got to get them on there to start with. So that's where the faculty come in. And I think faculty buy-in is important, and we're still working on that. As we said, use of CircleIn clearly associated with increased course successes, course pass rates, especially though when enough students are active, a critical mass of students are active in CircleIn. And typically, this is a good part in some ways, the more difficult the course, the more likely you're going to get a larger number of students being active in there. And the more likely you're going to draw in students that may have better study skills, may do well in general, but are struggling perhaps a little in that course. Finally, use of CircleIn clearly associated with increased course success rate, irrespective of the overall GPA, irrespective of the year in school, whether they're Pell eligible or not, whether they're first generation status or not, their race, their ethnicity. But most impressive, the difference between the pass rates of users and non-users and first-year students and Pell eligible first generation students of color are all bigger than the other instances. So the point is, and I'm going to go back to this, traditional, I'll just use myself as an example. My mother was a teacher, my father an engineer. They both were born in the 1930s. They're both 91 years old. They both went to college, which wasn't that usual in the 50s. So it was never an issue of whether I would go to college. It was an issue of where I would go to college. So I had that, what I would call privileged upbringing. The traditional supports for students like me are probably mostly adequate. But the supports for students that are less traditional, the supports in the peer learning community that CircleIn provides, I think can be particularly helpful. And I'll just say and I won't make any inferences about the schools you all are at, but at the University of North Dakota, students from these groups at that last bullet point have had more trouble. And so seeing that CircleIn helps them is fantastic. And that is the amazing part. I give you my email if you want to talk to me individually about any of these things. And with that, though, I'll turn it back to Gerald and the rest of the circle.